The fluorescent lights of Denver International Airport buzzed overhead as Marcus Chen shuffled through the security checkpoint line, his worn sneakers scuffing against the polished floor. His faded jeans hung loose on his thin frame, and his oversized hoodie, once black, now a sun-bleached gray, had seen better days. A patchy beard covered his jaw, and his uncombed hair stuck out from beneath a ratty baseball cap. To anyone watching, he looked like someone who'd been sleeping rough, maybe hitching rides across the country. It was 3 a.m, and the airport hummed with that peculiar energy of people caught between destinations, between sleep and wakefulness. Marcus clutched his crumpled boarding pass and a battered backpack that looked like it had survived a war. Inside were a few clothes, a toothbrush, and a small notebook. Everything he owned, or so it appeared. Before we continue with Marcus's story, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories with incredible plot twists like this one, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Now let's get back to the airport. The TSA agent at the document check barely glanced at Marcus. Her name tag read Sandra, and her expression screamed exhaustion. She took his boarding pass and driver's license with 2 fingers, as if afraid of contamination. "San Francisco?" she asked, her nose wrinkling slightly. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied quietly. Sandra's eyes flicked from the ID to his face, then back again. The photo showed a cleaner version of the man before her, but it was clearly the same person. She hesitated, studying the license longer than necessary. "You look different," she said suspiciously. "Been traveling," Marcus offered with a small shrug. "Rough couple of months." Sandra's colleague, a younger agent named Derek, leaned over. "Problem?" "Just checking," Sandra muttered. She ran the license through her scanner again. Marcus noticed her exchange a look with Derek, a look he'd seen before, the look that said, "Keep an eye on this one." "Go ahead," she finally said, practically tossing his documents back at him. At the security screening, things got worse. Marcus placed his backpack and shoes in the gray plastic bins, then walked through the metal detector. No beep. But the TSA agent monitoring the X-ray machine, a stocky man named Johnson, froze, staring at his screen. "Bag check," he called out. Marcus's heart sank. "Is there a problem?" "Step aside, sir." Johnson's tone made it clear it wasn't a request. 2 more agents appeared. One was a supervisor, badge gleaming under the harsh lights. They pulled Marcus's backpack aside and began unpacking it methodically. Every item was examined with theatrical suspicion. His worn t-shirts, his toiletries, his notebook. "What's this?" the supervisor asked, holding up the small notebook. "Just notes, personal thoughts." The supervisor flipped through it, scanning pages filled with Marcus's handwriting, observations about people, ideas, sketches of buildings and designs. "You some kind of artist?" "Something like that." "Sir, we're going to need to do a more thorough search," Johnson announced loudly, drawing attention from other travelers. People in line began whispering, craning their necks to see what was happening. Marcus felt the familiar sting of judgment. It wasn't the first time his appearance had made him a target, but it never got easier. "Whatever you need to do," he said softly. They swabbed his bag for explosives. They patted him down. They questioned him about where he'd been, where he was going, why he looked the way he did. Through it all, Marcus remained calm, answering each question with quiet patience. He'd learned long ago that anger only made things worse. "The guy looks homeless," Johnson muttered to a colleague, not quite quietly enough. "Probably trying to fly somewhere to panhandle." The supervisor finally cleared him, though her expression suggested she wasn't happy about it. "You're free to go. Stay out of trouble." Marcus repacked his bag with shaking hands. Not from fear, but from the effort of maintaining his composure. He could feel dozens of eyes on him, could hear the whispered comments from nearby travelers. "Did you see that guy? Looks like he hasn't showered in weeks. How'd he even afford a ticket?" He made his way toward his gate, head down, trying to be invisible. The airport at this hour was a strange mix of business travelers in suits, families with sleeping children, and the occasional person like him, someone who didn't quite fit the mold. At gate B7, Marcus found a seat in the corner, away from the clusters of waiting passengers. He pulled out his notebook and began to write, trying to lose himself in his thoughts. But the looks kept coming. A woman grabbed her purse and moved seats when he sat down nearby. A businessman gave him a wide berth, as if poverty might be contagious. "Excuse me, sir?" A gate agent approached him. A young man named Tyler with gelled hair and an overly bright smile. "I need to verify your ticket." Marcus handed over his boarding pass. Tyler scanned it with his handheld device, and his smile faltered. "There seems to be an issue. Can you come with me to the desk?" "What kind of issue?" Marcus asked, but Tyler was already walking away. At the desk, another agent, an older woman named Patricia, was typing furiously on her computer. "Mr. Chen, it appears your ticket was purchased with a credit card that's been flagged." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Flagged for what? Possible fraud. "The credit limit on this card is unusual, given your—" Patricia paused, her eyes sweeping over his disheveled appearance. "Given the circumstances, we need to verify the purchase. The card's valid," Marcus said. "I can assure you—" "Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside while we sort this out. You're holding up boarding." It was a lie. Boarding hadn't even been called yet, but Marcus stepped aside, feeling the weight of everyone's stares. He could see the other passengers watching, some with pity, most with suspicion or disgust. Tyler made a phone call, speaking in low tones. Patricia continued typing. Marcus stood there, his backpack at his feet, feeling smaller with each passing minute. This was supposed to be simple. Just a flight home, but nothing was ever simple when you looked like he did. 20 minutes passed. The gate area filled with more passengers. Business class was called, then the main boarding groups. Marcus remained standing to the side, waiting. "Mr. Chen," Patricia finally called, "we've verified your payment. However, your seat has been given away due to the delay. We can put you on standby for the next flight in 4 hours." "That wasn't my fault," Marcus protested, his voice rising slightly. "You held me here." "Sir, please don't make a scene," Tyler interjected, stepping closer. "We can get you on the next flight. I need to be on this flight. I have—" Marcus stopped himself. What could he say? That he had important meetings? Looking like this, no one would believe him. "Please, it's important." Patricia's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. "I'm sorry, but the flight's full. I can offer you a meal voucher for the delay." A meal voucher. $20 to make up for treating him like a criminal, like he didn't belong in their clean, orderly airport. Marcus felt the anger rising but swallowed it down. Anger wouldn't help. It never did. "Fine," he said quietly. The next flight. As he turned to leave, he heard Patricia mutter to Tyler, "Poor thing. Probably spent his last dollar on that ticket. Wonder where he got the money." Marcus walked away, feeling the familiar burn of shame and frustration. He found a quiet corner near a window overlooking the tarmac and slumped into a seat. The sky was beginning to lighten, streaks of pink and orange breaking through the darkness. He watched the planes take off and land, each one carrying people to their destinations, people who belonged, people who mattered. He pulled out his phone, an old model, screen cracked, and stared at it. He could make a call. One call, and all of this would change. But he wouldn't. This was the experiment after all. This was what he'd chosen. 6 months ago, Marcus Chen had been living a very different life, a life most people couldn't imagine. But he'd wanted to understand something, to truly understand what it meant to be invisible, to be judged, to be treated as less than. So he'd left it all behind, adopted this appearance, this persona. He'd wanted to experience the world as someone society ignored. He'd gotten his wish. The 4 hours crawled by. Marcus tried to rest, but the hard airport seats offered little comfort. He watched the sunrise fully break, watched the airport come alive with morning travelers, families, couples, solo flyers, all of them moving with purpose, with belonging. Finally, his flight was called. This time, there were no issues with his ticket. He boarded with the last group, walking past first class with its leather seats and complimentary champagne, past business class with its extra legroom, all the way to the back of the plane. His seat was 37B, middle seat, sandwiched between a large man who immediately claimed both armrests and a teenage girl who took one look at Marcus and put in earbuds, turning toward the window. The flight attendant, a polished woman named Jennifer with perfect makeup, barely made eye contact as she checked his boarding pass. "Stow your bag under the seat," she said curtly, already moving on to the next passenger. As the plane filled, Marcus noticed the empty seat in front of him remaining vacant, a small mercy. But as the doors were about to close, a late arrival came rushing on, a businessman in an expensive suit, sweating and flustered. "37A, he asked, checking his boarding pass and looking at the row where Marcus sat. His face fell. "Seriously?" He stood there for a moment, clearly considering his options. Finally, with visible reluctance, he shoved his leather briefcase into the overhead bin and sat down, immediately angling his body away from Marcus. The plane pushed back from the gate. Marcus closed his eyes, trying to find some peace in the white noise of the engines. Just a few more hours and he'd be home. Just a few more hours and he could end this experiment. He could shave, shower, put on clean clothes. He could step back into his real life. But would he really be able to forget what he'd learned, what he'd experienced? The casual cruelty, the assumptions, the way people's eyes slid past him as if he didn't exist, or worse, looked at him with disgust and suspicion. Was this what millions of people experienced every day? The plane climbed into the sky, and Marcus drifted into an uneasy sleep, dreaming of warm showers and soft beds and a world where he wasn't invisible. 2.5 hours later, the plane began its descent into San Francisco. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Flight attendants, prepare for landing." Marcus woke with a start, momentarily disoriented. The businessman next to him was on his phone, typing urgently. The teenage girl was still absorbed in whatever was playing on her screen. Below, Marcus could see the Bay Area spreading out like a glittering circuit board. Oakland, Berkeley, the Golden Gate Bridge in the distance. Home. The landing was smooth. The plane taxied to the gate, and then came the usual chaos of everyone standing up at once, grabbing bags, jostling for position. Marcus waited, letting the rush pass. He was in no hurry, but as people began to file off, a commotion started near the front of the plane. Marcus couldn't see what was happening, but he could hear raised voices. "Sir, you need to return to your seat," a flight attendant was saying firmly. "I'm not waiting another minute near that," someone responded angrily. Marcus's stomach sank. Were they talking about him? "Everyone, please remain calm," the flight attendant announced.
"We have a situation that needs to be resolved before we can complete deplaning." The businessman next to Marcus swore under his breath. "What now? I have a meeting in 40 minutes. Moments later, Jennifer, the flight attendant, appeared in the aisle, walking toward the back. Behind her was a uniformed airport security officer. They stopped at Marcus's row. "Mr. Chen," Jennifer asked, her voice dripping with false politeness, "we need you to remain seated while the other passengers deplane."
"There's been a complaint." "A complaint about what?" Marcus asked, though he already knew. "Please just cooperate, sir." The other passengers filed past, many of them staring openly now. Marcus heard the whispers. "What did he do?" "Probably tried to steal something. I knew something was off about that guy." When the plane was finally empty, except for Marcus, Jennifer, the security officer, and the pilot who'd emerged from the cockpit, the officer stepped forward. "Mr. Chen, I'm Officer Rodriguez. There was a complaint from a passenger that you made them uncomfortable during the flight. I need to ask you a few questions." "I didn't do anything," Marcus said, his voice tired. "I slept most of the flight." "The passenger felt threatened by your presence." Marcus let out a bitter laugh. "Threatened? I was asleep." "Sir, I need to verify your identity and your reason for travel. Can you show me your ID?" Marcus pulled out his driver's license and handed it over. Officer Rodriguez examined it carefully, then radioed something to someone. They waited in uncomfortable silence. "Mr. Chen, your license is valid, but given the complaint, I need to run your information through our system. It's standard procedure." "Standard procedure for what? Existing while looking homeless?" Officer Rodriguez's expression remained neutral. "Just doing my job, sir. This will only take a moment." He walked toward the front of the plane, speaking into his radio in low tones. Marcus sat there, feeling the familiar cocktail of anger, humiliation, and exhaustion. 6 months of this. 6 months of being treated as suspicious, as dangerous, as less than human, simply because of how he looked. The minutes ticked by. Jennifer stood nearby, arms crossed, clearly annoyed at being held up. The pilot had disappeared back into the cockpit. Then Officer Rodriguez's radio crackled to life. Marcus couldn't hear what was being said, but he saw the officer's posture change. Rodriguez straightened up, his eyes widening. He glanced back at Marcus, then at his radio, then back at Marcus again. "Copy that," Rodriguez said into his radio, his voice suddenly different, careful, almost nervous. "I understand." "Yes, sir, right away." He walked back to Marcus, and for the first time, there was uncertainty in his expression. "Mr. Chen, there's been a development. Can you come with me to the jetway, please?" "Am I being arrested?" Marcus asked flatly. "No, sir, no, nothing like that. Please, just come with me." Marcus grabbed his backpack and followed Rodriguez off the plane. As they walked up the jetway, Marcus noticed that the officer's entire demeanor had changed. He was no longer the authority figure issuing commands. He seemed almost deferential. At the gate, a scene was unfolding that Marcus hadn't expected. There were more uniformed officers, but also 2 men in expensive suits, and, Marcus blinked in surprise, the airport director, whom he recognized from news articles. All of them were looking at him with expressions ranging from shock to embarrassment to barely concealed panic. "Mr. Chen," the airport director stepped forward, his hand extended. "I'm Thomas Wright, director of SFO. I cannot apologize enough for what you've been put through today." "If we had known what?" Marcus asked, genuinely confused now. Had someone recognized him? But that didn't make sense. He'd been so careful. One of the suited men, tall, silver-haired, with the bearing of someone used to power, spoke up. "Mr. Chen, I'm Robert Harrison, head of airport security. When Officer Rodriguez ran your identification through our federal database, it triggered several high-level alerts. Your security clearance came back as classified at the highest levels. Marcus felt his heart begin to race. The security clearance, he'd forgotten about that. From his time serving on federal advisory boards, from his work with, we immediately contacted the Department of Homeland Security. Harrison continued. They informed us who you actually are. Mr. Chen, we had no idea he seemed unable to finish the sentence. Wright jumped in, his face flushed with stress. We had no idea we were dealing with Marcus Chen. The Marcus Chen, founder and CEO of Horizon Technologies, net worth estimated at over $40 billion, recipient of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, member of the National Security Council's Technology Advisory Board. The words hung in the air. Around them, gate agents and TSA officers who'd gathered to see what was happening began murmuring, their faces draining of color. Sandra, the TSA agent from security, was there. Johnson was there. Patricia from the gate. All of them staring. Oh my God, Sandra whispered. Oh my God, that was Marcus Chen. I checked him like he was. We need to have a serious conversation about profiling protocols, Harrison said sharply. But his words were directed at his staff, not at Marcus. Marcus stood there, still holding his ratty backpack, still wearing his stained hoodie and worn jeans. The experiment was over. The mask had been pulled away. But instead of relief, he felt numb. Mr. Chen, Wright said urgently, please, let us make this right. We have our VIP lounge, private, comfortable. We can arrange ground transportation for you, anything you need. You can what? Marcus said quietly. Treat me like a human being now? Now that you know I'm rich? The silence was deafening. Wright's mouth opened and closed. Harrison looked at his shoes. Marcus continued, his voice still soft but carrying an edge now. An hour ago, I was a problem to be managed. A suspicious character. Someone who made people uncomfortable. But my DNA hasn't changed in the last 5 minutes. The only thing that's changed is your knowledge of my bank account. Mr. Chen, please understand. Wright started. I do understand, Marcus interrupted. That's the problem. I understand perfectly. For 6 months, I've been traveling across this country, looking like this. He gestured at his clothes. Do you know why? Because I wanted to understand what life is like for people who don't have power, who don't have wealth, who don't fit society's narrow definition of respectable. He looked at each of them in turn, the director, the security chief, the officers, the gate agents. And I learned that how we treat people has nothing to do with their character, their intelligence, their worth as human beings. It has everything to do with how they look, what they wear, whether they fit into our comfortable expectations. Jennifer, the flight attendant, had tears running down her face. Mr. Chen, I'm so sorry. You didn't mean what? To treat me with contempt? To barely look at me? To make me feel like I didn't deserve basic human dignity? Marcus shook his head. But you did. You all did. And here's the thing. You'll do it again. Tomorrow. Next week. Next month. You'll see someone who looks like I looked, and you'll make the same assumptions. Treat them the same way, because that person won't trigger any federal databases. They'll just be poor, or homeless, or struggling, and they'll be invisible to you. The crowd around them had grown. Passengers waiting for their flights were watching with phones out, recording. Marcus could see the news cycle already spinning up in his mind. Billionaire goes undercover, exposes airport discrimination. But that wasn't why he'd done this. It wasn't for the headlines or the viral moment. Wright seemed to realize the magnitude of what was happening. Mr. Chen, please, let's discuss this privately. There's nothing to discuss, Marcus said. You've shown me exactly who you are. You've shown me what your systems are designed to do. Sort people into those who matter and those who don't. He adjusted his backpack on his shoulder. The exhaustion of the last 6 months suddenly hit him like a wave. He was tired of the experiment, tired of the judgment, tired of the casual cruelty he'd witnessed and experienced. I'm going home, he said simply. I'm going to shower, change into clean clothes. And tomorrow I'm going to start working on something I should have started years ago, a foundation dedicated to changing how we treat people experiencing homelessness, poverty, and economic hardship. Because if it takes $40 billion for someone to treat you with basic human respect, then our society is fundamentally broken. He started to walk away, but paused and turned back. And Mr. Wright, Mr. Harrison, I'd suggest you spend some serious time reviewing your policies and training your staff, because the next person who looks like I looked might not be a billionaire running an experiment. They might just be a human being who deserves dignity, and they definitely deserve better than what I got today. Marcus walked through the terminal, aware of the stunned silence behind him, aware of the phones tracking his every move. People parted before him now, not out of disgust, but out of recognition, out of embarrassment, out of the dawning realization that they might have passed this man, judged this man, dismissed this man. Near the exit, he passed a young woman sitting on the floor, her belongings stuffed into garbage bags beside her. She was maybe 20, with tired eyes and dirty clothes. She was crying quietly, trying to be invisible. Marcus stopped. He pulled out his phone, the cracked screen suddenly seeming absurd given what everyone now knew, and made a call. "Sarah? Yeah, it's me. I need you to do something. There's a young woman at SFO Terminal 2 near the exit. I need you to send someone to help her. Get her a hotel room for a month. Get her connected with social services, job placement, whatever she needs." "And Sarah? Make it happen in the next 30 minutes. He hung up and crouched down next to the young woman. Up close, he could see she was younger than he'd thought. Maybe 18, maybe not even that. "Hey," he said softly, "what's your name?" She looked at him with a mixture of fear and surprise. "Emma." "Why?" "Emma, I just made a call. Someone's coming to help you. A real person who will actually help. Not just pass you along to another system that doesn't care. They'll be here soon. You're not invisible. You're not nobody. You matter, okay?" Emma stared at him, confusion and hope warring on her face. Are you that guy? The one everyone's talking about? The billionaire? Marcus smiled, a real smile, the first in months. "Yeah, but 6 months ago, I looked just like you do right now. And you know what I learned? Having money doesn't make you valuable. Being human makes you valuable. Don't ever forget that." He stood up and walked toward the exit. Behind him, he could hear the commotion growing. Security trying to manage the crowd, media starting to arrive, the whole apparatus of attention and scandal grinding into gear. But Marcus Chen was already thinking about tomorrow, about the foundation he would build, about the policies he could help change, about the millions of people who lived every single day with the judgment and casual cruelty he'd only experienced temporarily. The automatic doors slid open, and California sunshine flooded over him. It was warm, bright, and real. He took a deep breath of outside air, free air. His phone buzzed, text messages flooding in. His assistant, his board members, news outlets requesting comment. But there was one message that made him pause. It was from Emma, the young woman from the terminal. Someone must have helped her charge her phone. It read, "Thank you for seeing me." Marcus looked back at the airport one last time. Through the glass, he could see the chaos still unfolding inside. People were learning his story, sharing it, dissecting it. Some would get it. Many wouldn't, but maybe, just maybe, a few would remember the next time they saw someone society had taught them to ignore. He sent back a simple reply. "Thank you for reminding me why this matters." Then Marcus Chen, still wearing his ratty hoodie, still carrying his worn backpack, walked into the sunlight, ready to begin the real work of changing not just systems, but hearts. Because he'd learned the hardest truth of all, that the measure of a society isn't how it treats its powerful, but how it treats those it considers powerless. And that lesson was worth more than $40 billion could ever buy.